Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. This podcast covers the national champions, who are still ranked number one, by the way. Good to be king. Joined today by the Dean, Bill Kurelic, and the Grand Poobah, Mark Porter. It is a beautiful Tuesday in the Gem City, I can tell you that. We are experiencing, it was 85 degrees yesterday, man. I don't know what that means, but I know it's the end of September, and I know the weather for this weekend. Night game in the shoe for Minnesota. It's looking to be about 70 and sunny during the day, even a little warmer. And so for nighttime, boy, what a beautiful evening in the shoe. If you've got tickets this weekend, you are a lucky human. And we are lucky humans to have our guys here. And we're going to talk some Cruton, and then we're going to get into Mark's breakdown of the tape from the game in Washington. It was quite an impressive performance on a lot of levels. Ohio State is ranked number one, but I'm getting the feeling now that, and you guys can disagree with this, we can even start with this. I'm getting the feeling now that the national vibe is Ohio State, Miami, and Oregon are the top three teams. Do you get that vibe based on what you've seen and what you've heard, William?
Yeah, certainly. After Oregon going into Penn State on a whiteout night and coming up with a win, a lot of talk about Oregon now, and rightly so. That is a tough place to win when they do their whiteout games and play at night and all, and that's a tough place to win. So give props to Oregon. I guess I think more along the lines right now of Ohio State and Oregon. But you make a good point with Miami. I got to see it for longer than half the season with Miami. And they may be for real. I just have to see it longer than that.
Bill, I said the same thing yesterday when Dave and I were discussing it. If you ask me, I think Oregon is their chief competition, but Miami has been talked about. I do find it kind of ironic. Those are two teams they've recruited against heavily in the last 24 months or so, and it's not surprising the three are on top. Mark, your vibe?
That Oregon and Miami, as soon as they came up, I'm like, I want to know what their salary caps are, because just what you said, they've been two of the more annoying people to Ohio State in the past couple of years. Miami, not so much, but Miami's annoyed everybody else with the money they're spending. And this is maybe a broader storyline, is Miami's going to be the first team that came from out of nowhere that bought a team that really was maybe a top 25 team and really wasn't making maybe a top 10 at different times in recent years. But this recent cash flow, it's going to justify what they've done, and we may see more of it if they're for real. Now we'll see that or whatever. Same thing with Oregon, the open checkbook, buying a team, so to speak, bringing in all the transfers, whole new receiving staff that wasn't there last year. Okay, these are bought and sold teams. So we'll see if this is the new trend of what you have to keep up with in college football. That win was impressive at Penn State. That crowd was on fire. That fourth quarter looked that looked like college football should be at any place in the country. That was really a cool atmosphere, and see them come out of that with that last second, just unbelievable.
Yeah, that was wild. Saturday was an incredible day to be a college football fan, just across the board.
The other thing I noticed nationally is when you said, what do you guys notice nationally? The other thing that popped up in my head is I can't get through my reels right now without these national guys going crazy over Matt Patricia and the Ohio State defense. I mean, it's like it's kind of making me mad. It's like we knew about that first. We were calling him out a couple of weeks ago as doing some pretty cool stuff. 4 weeks into it, he's the mad genius, and the national media is now onto it. So it's kind of cool to see what we saw in the first couple weeks. Week 4 now be just trending in my timeline.
Yeah, what you get in the days following the weekend are people have watched the tape, for example, and some people even the national media. And I said this yesterday to Dave that I watched just a couple things. Scott Van Pelt. I like to give people credit when I quote them. Scott Van Pelt and Todd McShay, different shows. When they started to talk about Ohio State's defense, both used an F-bomb. to, and that's not common for national guys. So they were like, these guys are so blanking good. And then I think Van Pelt said, all I know is Ohio State's defense is a bunch of mother blankers. And
they were talking
that
about
word used for emphasis is accurate. Go ahead, Mark.
I think I saw a Joel Klatt thing, and they were talking about how he's using different defenses on every play. It's NFL-like. It's confusing quarterbacks. I was like, we were saying that weeks ago. We were on to this trend, and so it's kind of cool. It really is that, you don't have to worry. We're not in backspin right now, like, oh, is this the right guy? I mean, I remember before the season there was a little bit of angst by everybody, all new starters, all new coordinators. What could this be? And you sit here week 4 and you say, okay, we're pretty happy with where we are, and Ohio State is what it's supposed to be. Yeah, and I saw PJ Fleck.
Yep.
I actually saw that clip, and he talked about the defense, and they're only giving up 5 points. He threw a lot of respect at what we're doing at Ohio State. So the sub packages, I'm listening to Matt Patricia's interviews where he's talking about how hungry some of the young guys are to get on the field, and how he's rewarding them with a sub nickel package, a 3-4 package, a dime package, a hybrid package that deals with tight ends. It's really cool to see these extra players getting a little taste of, if you give everyone a piece of the pie, it seems to keep the building a little happier, where if the pie is only sliced in a few slices and not everybody gets to enjoy it.
I think we were also able to see this coming a little bit better, or a lot better. And I really believe this about coverage in general in sports now. The national people just don't have the boots on the ground that we have. They just don't have the internal knowledge. If you're a Bucknutter and you're watching the national coverage, that's fun to watch from a vibe perspective and kind of how everyone else is viewing you. But it's not realistic to expect those people to have the day-to-day knowledge that the Nutters have, just because we're so locked into it. And part of the reason everyone is so shocked is that you've got 8 new starters. And look, I was interested in seeing how the defensive line performed when you replace all 4 guys, but it wasn't like I just assumed they were going to be worse. I think people outside the Nutter vision just assumed because you lost 4 guys to the draft that you'd be worse. Well, this is Ohio State. Dave and I went through it yesterday. Let's just get the defensive line. Caden McDonald, and I'll have a boarding house item on that today, is very talented. And he's replacing a first-round draft pick. The 2 guys on the outside, Caden Curry, is he good at football? Kenyatta Jackson. And also keep in mind, and I said this yesterday too, we talk about recruiting. Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson are who you chose over paying X million dollars to a freshman defensive end. They chose to do it this way. It seems to be working. Now, that doesn't mean they won't get any of them, but still, just very, very impressive across the board. I think they're better talent-wise on defense. As good as Cody Simon was, and he was great, he's not better than Arvell Reese. You're getting to the point now where everyone pretty much writes Arvell Reese is the best linebacker in the country. Jermaine Matthews is just a better player than Denzel Burke. He just is. So across the board, they've been impressive. I mean, what they did on defense this past weekend was incredible. We'll get into that. But Bill,
real quick,
yes.
Going back to Caden McDonald.
Let's.
When he was being recruited, he wasn't a big target of Georgia's at all. But that wasn't because he wasn't good or a very talented player. At that point, Georgia had on their roster, and if anybody doesn't know, Caden McDonald is from Georgia. Georgia had on their roster guys that were like him, so to speak, 6'2", 300 plus pounds. That year, that cycle, they were looking for guys because they already had that type of guy. They were looking for guys that were like 6'5", bigger, taller guys. They weren't looking for the 6'1", 6'2", 300 pounder. And so they liked him a lot. They just had those guys already, so they were looking for a different type. And lo and behold, the Buckeyes were there to scoop him up and take advantage of that situation. So, and you go back to Caden Curry, he was really highly recruited. He wasn't necessarily a 5-star Tuimoloau, but he was still really highly recruited. I remember that was a huge deal when Ohio State won that recruiting battle. So as you mentioned, Dan, we got good players there. Ohio State does. Maybe not necessarily the 5-star, but they were highly good, very good players coming out of high school. And Larry Johnson and Matt Patricia are taking advantage of those players.
How about this, Bill? Can you tell me right now, through 4 games, trivia question, Mark, both you guys, if you can play at home too, total number of sacks from Georgia's defensive line through 4 games?
Yeah, without Googling, I do not know.
I do not know. I'll
0.
throw out I was going to say 4, 1 a game.
Yikes.
0.
Yikes. That is not enough.
How do you think we'd be feeling right now
Oh,
about Cruton if 3 starters on our, or how do you think Georgia feels that 3 starters on our defense are from Georgia and not playing for Georgia? And I think their pressure rate is last in Division I. It was only behind Purdue heading this past weekend. So the UGA fans should be peeved. I know that says they have the number 1 recruiting class coming in. And if you go look at it, there is never a time when Georgia should not finish number 1 in recruiting right now. Go look at the players they have in the state. And I talk about this all the time. Go just Gwinnett County. Go look. Caden McDonald, by the way, was Gwinnett County Defensive Player of the Year. Go look at that defense. It's unbelievable. So they have no excuse at Georgia. We would be getting crushed here if that was going on. We had 0 sacks from the defensive line after 4 games. People would be, there's a certain individual in Columbus that would be under such fire if that was the case that I'm not even going to say his name out loud. All right, William Cruton. Night game now. It is Minnesota, so it probably won't have the sex appeal of the Penn State game, but will it have a guest list worthy of the nighttime kickoff?
It'll have a good guest list. Like you said, it's not going to be like Texas, for instance. It's not going to be like Penn State coming up in 1 month exactly, which if shameless plug on our board, we have a running list of recruits visiting Ohio State for the next 2 home games, this weekend in Minnesota, and then after that, Penn State. And as I mentioned on the thread, it's going to be 2 important recruiting weekends for Ohio State. The Minnesota game, again, not a long list like the Texas game or Penn State game, but at the top, it's pretty darn good. You've got Kamari Bing, Maryland defensive back commitment, making an official visit to Ohio State this weekend. Then you've got Gray Ford, an interesting guy because he's really good and he's an offensive tackle and he's out of the state of Texas. He's a 2027 guy. He was at the Ohio State-Texas game, and he was able, if you remember, think back, a lot of Texas guys could not make it up for that game because there just weren't flights to get to a noon game. Well, he made it up to that Texas game because his game that week, his opening game of the season that week, was on a Thursday night. So he had no problem getting a flight. He had all day Friday to get to take advantage of any flight. So he made it up for that game. And then now he's going to be back for the game. In part, it helps that it is a night game. That does help for sure. So you got those 2 guys. You've got Jacob Curry. Ohio State is still looking for a 2026 linebacker for their recruiting class, 2026 class. They have not scheduled Curry yet for an official visit, but they have offered him a scholarship. And if all goes well this weekend, I expect that he likely will make an official visit. Of course, they also have Jaden Williams from Massillon that they've now offered too. So there's 2 linebackers from the 2026 class that they've offered a scholarship to. Caden Way is a very good 2027 running back that they've offered a scholarship to. So Austin Phillips is a 2029 linebacker that's very good that, He's only 2029, but I wouldn't be shocked if he would get an offer from Ohio State. So it is a good list of that is going to get better as the week goes on. Again, not like Texas or Penn State, but it's still it's going to be a good recruiting weekend for Ohio State.
I said this about Kamari being the DB out of the Baltimore area. In the past, I think when a guy was committed to Maryland, unless his name was Dwayne Haskins, we didn't really show that much interest. Keep in mind, now that the financial situation has flattened out, Maryland has actually recruited pretty well. I think they've got the number one player in the class committed there. Zion Ely, Bill, he may not be the number one guy, but he's the number one defensive end or one of them. So, and also Bing is from St. Francis, which is a powerhouse. If you guys saw Michigan's interim coach, Biff Poggi built up Gilman to be a powerhouse. I don't think he was did Biff Poggi go to St. Francis? I don't know, but that's the resident Baltimore powerhouse right now. So that's legit. All right, let's go through some stuff here. Mark, your thoughts on what you've heard, what you saw this past weekend in Ohio, and then we'll get to the other good stuff. We will look at the tape, and then we'll get to the questions. But anything from Ohio this past weekend that you saw that jumped out to you?
Yeah, there's a few questions I'll get to when we do Buckeye in the Sky about the defense. I see them popping up.
Yep.
This weekend I went to St. Xavier and Elder won, and they're the number one team in Division I right now. If people always ask me this question, hey, if there's like one place you want to go and see a game on a Friday night, there's like 10 of them when people ask me that question. But Elder and St. Xavier, let's put it this way. They have those all male student sections. I'm scared to walk in front of those for fear that I'm wearing a funny pair of shoes or I have a dumb look on my face, because when they grasp onto you and attack, there's nothing worse than 17, 18-year-old boys in unison going back and forth at each other and finding a player that they don't like or a mom it is awesome. I mean, it is high school sports. They chant back and forth. It makes the game so much more lively and electric, and there aren't many of those places in Ohio. So whether it's at the Pit or it's at St. X, that's a rivalry in a game. And when they're undefeated, I got a special treat that night to an atmosphere that is much different than some of the atmospheres I've had earlier in the year. I also saw Lakota West and Middletown. Geez, oh man, I just, the amount of talent on that field, I could talk a whole podcast. And guess what? When we go through some of that film Thursdays, the day we break down the prospects, we saw Judah Blair. Wow, is he fast? Not nearly as big, as I thought. He looks in pads compared to some other guys, very linebacker, strong safety-esque, but he's down at defensive end. So there's a little preview on him. I know he's one of the top players in the class of 2028 in the country. But yeah, there's my little preview of the weekend. And then, of course, Buckeye in the Sky.
That's hilarious. Details us that.
It really is. I mean, it's amazing how 17 and 18-year-olds or 16-year-olds can find a flaw in anybody or anything, whether it's just whatever it is. You know how it is. They know the dirt on all the other kids on the other team. They have specific rips, and it's really entertaining. I wish I knew the meaning behind more of the stuff, but that is high school football at its finest. And I'm sure in a gym it's 10 times worse, because you can probably hear it way better.
For basketball games, that's probably.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, what an atmosphere! Really cool.
If you want to go to a couple of years ago, I went to a Moeller St. X game.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh my goodness! Like what we're saying, that's like a college game atmosphere.
Really
the tailgating for a high school football game, it's just incredible.
I didn't know we were allowed to talk about the tailgating. I walked by someone's setup, and between the RV, the flat screens, the grills, the food, the Escalades around it, there had to be $500,000 in a damn tailgate setup. I mean, it was like, this isn't tailgating. This is beyond anything. I mean, and it's only out not to be outdone by the next $500,000 setup, 10 yards down the road. I mean, people, they know how to party before these games. That's for sure.
That's, if you take everything into account, the love for the game, the attendance, the quality of play, that's some of the best high school football in the United States right there.
Yeah, it really
Cincinnati teams have gone on the road and have played in public, played against other powerhouses and done very well. I actually attended college when I was a freshman at the University of Dayton. Our quarterback was a freshman from Elder named Steve Keller. That probably would jog a name. And he was only 5'9". That's why he was he had more newspaper clippings with him on the front page of the newspaper that it was like when they played Elder, it was like him and another guy on the front page and all their stats. And he started day one. He was incredible. That's when I learned that height had nothing to do with being a quarterback. We stood outside and he was throwing the ball and it looked like Dan Marino, man. He was like 5'9". Brad Austin was the middle linebacker. Unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident. He was married to my wife's housemate, so that was depressing. But real football, man. Elder, and the great Todd Geiser also went to Elder, and that will be fun for my friends back home. But we digressed.
And usually you think of private schools or Catholic schools or Christian schools that the crowds aren't going to be, they're going to be small because they have no community to draw from. They're from all over. There's not like if you live in Massillon, you have the community is all interested in football. It's not that way with private schools yet. When you go to a Catholic League game like a Moeller against St. Xavier, the crowd's unbelievable. Even without communities, it's just incredible.
Look, the best tailgate in Dayton that I've been to was for Fairmont versus Alter, and Alter's private school. And they rent the houses across the street, the front yards of the stadium, and they tailgate in there. So, yeah, man, private schools can get it done. Cincinnati's a little bit different, Bill, in that, some towns, the private school players are the best. Some towns they're not. Cincinnati, their private schools and their Catholic schools, those guys, like, you can go into a bar now, 30 years later, and get those guys going. You'll know. They all know where each other's from, and it's a big deal there. It has to do with where you live in the city. I think Elder's more the western part of the city. So you get those guys from Cleves, those knuckleheads. You never know. All right, William. Thank you for your stuff on the recruiting. We are going to shift to Eye in the Sky. And like we've talked about, we went out to Washington. They were averaging, 50 points per game. They scored 6 and never got into the end zone. I've never been more confident in a team when the other team gets into the red zone. Most teams I pull for, they get in the red zone. You're just like, these guys are incredible. Mark, take us through the first few plays that you broke down just of the offense and the defense getting it done on the road.
Yeah, there's so much talk about the Patricia defense and just what you said. How did they do what they did? There was a comment earlier that said, we're running NFL defenses coordinators have never seen. There is some truth to that, but they're not running defenses people have never seen. They're running concepts within those defenses, and they're so multiple. The comment was there's almost a different look every play, so preparation for it is really tough. Cover 4 shell. There's 4 linebackers on the field, so you want to try to categorize some of these defense with the 3 down linemen, and hey, that's your 4-3, but both middle linebackers aren't inside. This middle linebacker has detached from the formation. You see the 2 outside guys here. Is this the middle linebacker or is this the middle linebacker? There's a lot of things going on that, wow, there's only one guy inside, and now you're tempted to try to take advantage of one guy inside, but that's an illusion because you got the 3 defensive tackles, and then the next play is going to be something different. Trips bunch to the top of the field is the formation for Washington. Here is one of the wrinkles that you don't see normally out of college. You'll see Arvell Reese at the bottom of the field where it looks like both of the guys are coming off the edge. Once that tackle sets for him, what's Arvell going to do? He's going to disappear. And what did that just do? It has these 2 guys blocking one. Now, this guy is essentially wasted. He's wasted on this step at him, and now when Arvell drops back, we have an extra guy in coverage, and they wasted an offensive lineman. Boy, that's a tricky scheme, and there's not a lot of people pulling that off. That gives a defense the advantage. Now, Caleb Downs does a great job of coming downhill and taking away the guy that would have been open. Once he's not open, it's a coverage sack because everybody else is covered up. When he steps in, you see all the defensive linemen start to disengage. So the 4-man rush gets there as the defense works as a cohesive unit, down the field to stop this. Who gets credit for the sack? They probably both get a half there. Okay, down around the goal line. This is one of my plays that we see later. This is the old 6-2 defense. With those 4 defensive linemen, they're really heating you up in between the guards and tackles with 4 big bodies. Going to be tough to do much down there. There's 4 linebackers. The 2 of the linebackers are placed at defensive end, which gives you 6 down defensive linemen, 2 middle linebackers. And then the rest of those guys are the corners and safeties. Notice they are at linebacker depth or maybe inside of linebacker depth. So now when you're running the ball, you have to account for them, which you would never normally have to account for them. And here's my digression to this type of situation. It's 4th and 1. Don't cry to me on 4th and 1 that you can't get it or not get it. You had the rest of the field to make a play. But when the defense gets down here, sometimes they say, let's go into the casino and make this a 50-50. We're going to bet all run here. If Ohio State was the pass, both tight ends would be standing alone in the end zone and no one would be on him. It'd be a free touchdown. Sometimes that's the only way to stop a 4th and 1 is to all out, everybody up there, kind of cheat and say, we're abandoning all pass responsibilities here. And if we guess right, we'll stop this 4th and 1. But if you play any other defense down there, you're probably not going to stop them on 4th and 1 if they run it. So I think there's a little bit in the Washington defense where this is all out. Corners up, safeties up. If they score here on a pass play, they win. But let's bet on run. And they were right. The fullback sees a little leakage there, which kind of takes him off his responsibility. He may have been able to pick up the unblocked linebacker here. Probably should have. Now, the thing here is little man
definitely
wins.
Should have.
Yeah, low man wins here, and we don't get low enough soon enough. And then once you get someone down at your legs, it's hard to keep them riding. So hats off to the Washington defense there, as hard as that is to say. You see Ohio State had a pre-snap cover 4. Caleb Downs is rolling down. Now I'm going to pause this here. We only have 3 blockers, and they have the center, guard, tackle, tight end. And if this fullback went to the side, that'd be 5-on-3. We would be seriously outmatched. That's why Caleb's going to roll down here to the linebacker spot, but it's still going to be 5-on-4. This is a good scheme by Washington. That's why we break this stuff down. Did someone else scheme us? We have 4 guys down here to the bottom of the field, and they only have 2 blockers. This is a receiver out here, so there's 2 guys for 4. We're not running that way. They do a good job of calling it. This just becomes man on man. Can any of the Ohio State guys defeat their block? And you see these blocks setting up, and we don't. We don't disengage fast enough. The hole pops. The receivers downfield do a good job. And these aren't great blocks, but it's enough when you're running downhill. That's not a great open field tackle. And I got to pause that. You want to talk about one of the hardest situations in sports? Coming downhill at an elite athlete in open space with a lot of ground between you is not something you want to wish on your worst enemy. That is tough skating out there.
The Washington back is also not skinny.
No, and he's got feet and he's got all the momentum in the world. And, it's really – that's a tough spot. So I hate to point out guys when they do that, but okay.
You got to get a body on them, though. You got to at least redirect them or something. You can't whiff like that.
So Ohio State must have done film study, must have seen this blitz before, and they have a play called that we haven't seen them call ever. I mean, I've broken down a lot of games. I have never seen this call. They see 7 guys on the line of scrimmage and 4 guys back. The tendency must have been all-out blitz on film. They must say, okay, this is an all-out blitz. Ohio State gambles right back and calls a play where it's a pass behind the line of scrimmage, okay? So you have to catch it behind the line of scrimmage or this would be an illegal play because everybody else is going to block at the snap of the ball. The unblocked defender was talked a lot about on TV where you can't block 7. Someone's coming free, so the ball has to come out by the time you get to your last step. A short, quick pass essentially is what it is. Flare pass. They're going to do the slant here, and all this is a slant is with everybody blocking. You kind of find the void behind all the rushers. You invite them back. Come on back, guys. Come get the quarterback. Give us more room behind you. And there goes Jeremiah Smith wide open. And then, we have an extra blocker going down the field here. Everybody's engaged. There's a running back, Donaldson, with nobody even the block. And that's a walk-in touchdown versus a very aggressive 7-man blitz. I'd
By
like
the way,
to keep talking. The people on radio probably don't enjoy that as much, but go ahead, Dan.
still, I'll say this until I watched you do that in the breakdown. I didn't realize that play had to be thrown behind the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
Jeremiah runs that so perfectly. He flattens that out so perfectly. That attention to detail right there, man. That
How
is
about
something
letting the pass rushers come up the field 2-3 yards to create that little void in there? You know what a disaster that play looks like if it doesn't work? Unblocked man coming at your quarterback. Jeremiah somehow gets stymied by a linebacker that drops to the middle or something. Oh, you're taking a 10, 15-yard sack there, and it looks terrible. But they knew that blitz was going to be there. I mean, that was like, we got him, guys. Or it may have been an audible or something they went to when they saw that 7-man blitz. I'd love to know how smart our coaches are and how much they knew before that play happened.
You hear a lot the term execution. It's kind of like coach speak. Oh, we got to execute better. What you saw right there, that is perfect execution.
Perfect.
That's like they thought of the play. They got the look they wanted. The receiver didn't run it 2 inches to the right. He ran it perfect. The quarterback sold it. The pass was perfect. That was really an impressive play.
So it'd be like us three watching Washington film and maybe like 8 times seeing that exact same blitz. And we all say to each other, guys, if we see that, what is the ultimate play to beat it? Give me your ideas. And guys start drawing stuff up and there's probably 4 or 5 ideas on a board. And everybody sits there and says, you know what? We like that one. And let's do it. When we see that blitz, call jailbreak or whatever you're going to call this, funnel, tunnel, whatever. And boy, you look really smart, when it works. I mean,
there must have been a tell on there.
The 7 guys up. And the film study must have said, hey, listen, every time they do that, it's all out. They don't drop out.
Okay, I was going to say, that's a good point, because a lot of times now you'll see them do that, and it's not a zone blitz, but it gives you the illusion, and then those guys all drop back.
That's what I'm saying. What if they drop out there and you have that play locked in? You're done because you're blocking downfield. You don't even have receivers that are looking for a ball. I mean, it's a throwaway or a sack. So,
and I will say this, and we'll move on to some questions. Jeremiah, we talked about the running back from Washington in the open field being a questionable tackle. Jeremiah is one of those receivers when he gets going. You got to make a business decision at that point, because he will trample you. You talk about being called out by the elder fans in front of. I was going to say, keep in mind, there's video going too. Some phone is on, and if you're really embarrassing, you're going to go viral. You try and tackle Jeremiah Smith in the middle of the field and get trampled, you are going to be on everyone's phone in about 15 seconds. So
I remember Adrian Peterson would get going in the open field, and that big body, that 6'3", 220-pound body, when it's at full speed, it's like, you're right. Standing in front of that takes a real mental, yeah.
Here's what you see. Guys wait because they don't want to go head on, and they'll try and come from the side and get the knees because they're not taking that full. You get the pad on the knees or you're going down. All right. Lots of questions. Bill, this one's for you. It's a good one. And it's you can take this specifically, and Bill, you can also talk about this kind of generally as we start to lose coaches. I mean, shoot, who we lost? UCLA, Virginia Tech, and Arkansas. Those are real programs. Those aren't necessarily the kind of programs Ohio State traditionally recruits against, but the question will come up, Bill, and it has, from Robert Ballantyne. With the firing of Arkansas coach Sam Pittman, are there any Razorback players that the Buckeyes would like to see enter the transfer portal? Bill, before you answer that, when this happens, if you go to 24/7 Sports main site, we have people at Arkansas, at Virginia Tech, at UCLA. They will have for you from their guys, from their Bucknuts guys who are for their site, a list of exactly who they want to keep, who's in danger of leaving, all that stuff. So if you want to start your research there and then go to the top 2 or 3 guys, and that's who Ohio State might go after. So Bill, Arkansas in particular, and then in general, do you think Ohio State saves spots for players whose programs maybe didn't matriculate the way they expected?
Well, when I look at when a coach gets fired, or in the situation with Arkansas middle of the season, first thing I look at is their list of commitments. Who might Ohio State look to flip? That's my first place I look. And I did that with Arkansas. And doesn't mean that there's no one that they would really go after to flip. But if you look at their current commitments in the 2026 class, there aren't any really with an Ohio State connection. Like Alabama, when Saban, there was guys that had Ohio State connections, obviously Caleb Downs and so on. But if you look at Arkansas's commitments, there are none that I can see. I'm not even sure. When I looked, I don't even believe there is an Arkansas commitment that Ohio State offered a scholarship to. Now, again, that doesn't mean they won't go after anybody. It just means that there's no connection right there. And that's always the first thing I look at. As far as the roster, looking at their current roster, because they do have that 30-day window now to enter the transfer portal, I didn't really see anybody on their roster that I'd say, oh, wow, that's a Caleb Downs type connection, because Ohio State finished second for Caleb Downs when he was a senior in high school. Same thing with Sayin. That was a big connection there. I don't see anybody necessarily, when I look at Arkansas's roster even, that there's really that connection there. Now, again, that doesn't mean they won't go after somebody, because if they think somebody's good enough and can help the program, they will. It's just that they don't have that built-in connection.
Yeah, I looked at the list. There's a defensive tackle on there that they think is going to be highly coveted, but I think Bill hit it. There's not many guys on there that Ohio State was in with it. Now, keep in mind, with the transfer portal, it does allow you to go after guys that you maybe didn't have as much interest in the past. Excuse me. We talked about like Quinshon Judkins, several other guys. Will Howard never had an offer from Ohio State. So
Anianwa, no connection there, but he ends up at Ohio State. So it does happen.
Yep, it does. I just don't think Arkansas has those dudes. And don't think there are many other SEC schools who are probably interested in those dudes. It'll be very interesting to see who they hire as the coach at Arkansas. I don't know. Man, I think usually off the top of my head, I can think of someone who could go in there and really get it done. That's not an easy job, Arkansas. Not an easy job. It's like kind of like coaching at Purdue. You know what I mean? The Big Ten. He did okay. It's just that's a tough gig, man.
It is.
John Daly I think he's your main donor, which is probably weird. All right, let's talk. Let's see if we have any other questions here. What do you think about this? I saw an article that said Ryan Day will be an NFL candidate. I'm sure that's possible. We talked about this.
How could he not?
Yeah, but we talked about this yesterday, Dave and I, a little bit. If things keep going the way we want and they are able to win the game this year, he's going to walk off that field being widely regarded as the best coach in college football, pretty much without argument. That said, his son is a junior in high school, I believe. I don't see him leaving personally. That's just my opinion until RJ gets through his senior year. Certainly wouldn't want to move a kid at that time. And also, how many NFL jobs are better than the Ohio State job? That needs to be discussed too. I mean, pretty nice. Ask Matt Patricia to go out there and have the best team on the field every single time you play. That's just not the case in pro football. Anyone who watched the debacle of Sunday night that made you invest all that time and finish with a tie lets you know that sometimes things can go screwy. Go ahead, Mark.
So there's arguments for and against. How could you not be a candidate? I mean, you deserve to be a candidate. If you're not, the NFL is not paying attention. You've rebuilt teams. You've taken teams that no one really saw it coming. You did a run last year that was remarkable. You've got a brand new team. So, like you're saying, it's going to be there if he wants it. Now, the real question is, how many of those NFL jobs, would you take over a place like this? And there's a lot of NFL jobs that those are probably the rebuilds. Like, do you want to take over a team that's in the gutter and rebuild them? Okay, that's kind of tough. Ohio State's the creme de la creme. Here's the real question, and this is when I talk to college coaches. The college game is such a mess right now with the portal and recruiting and your social life. You really are never leaving the building. You're never off the clock. Where the NFL guys, hey, it's 6:30, I'm going home to my wife. On the weekends during the off season, I can spend it with my family and do some traveling. This recruiting is insanity for some people. And yes, he has mastered it. Yes, they are the tip of the spear. Yes, they get who they want. There's no better place to be recruiting than Ohio State. So you're right. Columbus is the place to be. If you're going to be a college coach, he has the job. But if there's anything in the back of his mind that's saying, boy, this is a grind right now. Like every time I think I get a recruit and I solve a problem, I got 3 more problems down the road. And this just, not that the NFL is not problem free, but there's a different lifestyle out there. And sometimes coaches get to a point, and I don't know anything inside here. I'm just talking about the coaches I know I know a coach that wanted to be a college coach since the day he came out of the womb. That's all he wanted to do. He lived, breathed, and died it. He got in the NFL, and a couple of years later, he said, I would never go back. I'm coaching every day. I'm actually a coach. The coach is the game. I'm not a babysitter. I'm not going to classes. I'm not traveling in my car and staying at hotels every night. I'm not missing my family. I'm not talking to 16-year-olds on the phone every night for 2 hours and talking about video games and modern warfare. And, this is one man's opinion, but that's the stuff that these college coaches are doing outside of the college game. You're lucky if you're 50% coach and 50% dad, babysitter, mentor, recruiter, grinder, stuff like that. Going to the conventions, the showcases. And, I spend 3 weeks on the road with showcases in May. These college coaches are at every single one of them with me. All across the country they're going on. There is no break. There used to be a mandatory window in July where the college coaches would get 2 weeks to a month off. And when I started, those guys would enjoy that month is gone. They're down to a couple days or a week, or, it's a 52 a week, and they're paid well. They're paid for it. And that's the rub. You can go do something else. You won't make as much and have nearly as much fun. Long digression on that, but there is a difference. If there is a pull away from the greatest football team in college football to the NFL, it's maybe not about the football as much as it is the auxiliary stuff that goes with football.
In short, that's the elephant in the room, recruiting. And if you talk to most college coaches, assistant coaches, head coaches, and all, that's the thing that they aspire to is in regards to the NFL. The recruiting is not there like it is. It is to some extent because you do have free agents, but it's nothing like college football recruiting, nothing at all.
I think you bring up a great – go ahead.
And it's one thing if it was just the recruiting. Now you spend that time to get a kid, and a year later he leaves you. Yeah, and then he leaves you. And then you have that empty feeling of, what am I – I think this is what coaches have confided. What am we doing, Mark? What are we doing right now? Like we're
talk to a lot of the MAC level guys too, Mark, and they are Ohio State. When you're at the top of the spear, I don't know if that stress is there, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, no, and that's why I said you're at the tip of the spear. A lot of these problems are as minimized as they could possibly be with the effects of what they have on like a MAC school, but it's still not as nice as that NFL life. And yeah, you're going to evaluate the combine and you're going to go to a Senior Bowl and stuff like that, but you're living, you have NFL problems, not college problems. And I tell you what, until you've, and I hate to say this, tried to win over a snot-nosed 16-year-old who sticks his thumb in the air to you because you're not giving him enough money or he tries to big time you. That type of environment is not fun. Like, really, you're going to big time me, you 16-year-old that hasn't accomplished anything? Boy, that's a mentality that hasn't been in college football because the money is there now.
I'm hesitant to see it change, though, because I really think Ohio State has the right approach right now and is benefiting greatly from the way it's run. I am not one who thinks the bottom's going to drop out.
No,
I think they've got a great plan. No, but there are people who think that they're not running it correctly and they're not recruiting correctly. And they're not. I mean, it's hard to say that when we talked about Dave and I yesterday. I can't explain the Michigan game, but for the last year or so, 18 months, they've been pretty much spot on with everything they've done, from the hiring to the implementation to the recruiting. So I am on board with Team Day. And though he has NFL ties, keep in mind, Chip kind of got him going there. And Chip went back So there are people who think that. We'll give the last word to Dee, and she will go with these kids are blank. Hey, who would know? And of course, she does not mean number 6, who was number 1 in our hearts. Appreciate everyone stopping by. Have a good one.